And so I hope you will give a warm welcome to Simon Parkes.
Hello, it's lovely to be back. Thank you very much indeed. Americans never really understand British politics, do they? Yeah, I was a councillor in the London Borough of Hackney. I did a full term and a half of office there, and I was chair of a committee in 1999 and was personally responsible for 15 million quid, 15 million, and in another we call it directorate, I don't know what they call it now, 25 million. So it was approaching nearly 50 million pounds that I was personally responsible in 1999. You try and find a councillor now, the power that's taken away from local people through their councils being destroyed and given to central government means that councillors now don't have the sort of responsibility that they should have. Anyway, that's my view. I'm very grateful to Kerry. I suppose a hybrid is a correct term. I remember my friend Wyn Keach, who saw me some 8-9 years ago, who said to me, he said, "Someone's taken a lot of trouble to put you together." He said, "It seems to be working and you're all balanced." So for the record, yes, when I went public, I wasn't going to be one of these people that had a part reptilian but was too frightened to tell you, and so they claim to be Palladian. So many people out there are not, but they're frightened, and that means if they're not in balance or in calm with themselves, how can you expect to be in balance or in calm with them? So I've very publicly said, look, there's 1/3 reptilian, which is Draconis, 1/3 which is mantis or mantid, and 1/3 which is hollow earth human, which is about 5 dimension. And I also said, half jokingly, tongue-in-cheek, that the mantis or mantid and the hollow earth human gang up on the reptilian part. So it's always been sort of balanced that way. So thank you very much indeed for that very interesting introduction. Right. I try to be light-humoured, and I try to give you the truth. And if I'm not sure, I won't tell you. But I never want to fear or scaremonger. I want to give you what I know to be true so that you can prepare for it, you can think about it, and you can go and do your own research. I don't stand here to do it to make you go away. I'm not trying to sell newspapers. Okay, and incidentally, I disagree. I think good news stories do actually sell papers. So I don't have any bad stories here today for you. I've got some concerning stories, but nothing that we need to worry about. So here we go. Let's all check the jolly old technology here down on Earth. Fantastic. Right, constraints, what's allowed, what's not allowed. I publicly have always said there was a Holocaust. I have always said that. But I have disagreed with the numbers of Jewish people that were killed. Okay? Now, if anybody stands and says they disagree with the Holocaust, that video will be taken down from YouTube. No question about it. And there are a number of other things that can't be said now. And I think each speaker, he or she, has to make a decision. Do they want to tell you what they want to tell you, 200, 250 of you, or do they want to tone it down a little bit so they get out to 30, 40, 50,000 people or whatever it is? And that's the decision that is made. Now today, fortunately, we're not going down that road because I don't have any of those topics that we would have a problem with. But I want you to understand, please, that for all speakers now, there is a legal obligation which can be fining or prison if he or she goes down certain roads, which 6 months ago you could quite easily have discussed. Okay, so these are changes that are affecting people like me because I'm talking, and that's the way it is. So what's allowed? All right, what's happening right now? I wanted to start off this with the up-to-date information. I always think, although I'd like to talk to you what happened when I was 7 years old, and I think it's really important to me, unless you're doing a research on mantids or research on Draconis reptilians, perhaps what's more important for us on everyday lives is what's happening now. What's my take? What am I being told? What can I forward to you? So we're going to get that out of the way with, and then we'll have some time and we'll talk about things that are not pressing in the same way. Right, you're familiar with this is the second of the 2 tanker attacks. And and it's a very important aspect that's occurring. Now, can I just check with a show of hands that everyone is aware of these attacks? Great, thank you. I just do not want to assume. Right. This, on the left-hand side, is the standard picture that you will obtain if you go Google search or you go on YouTube. I've got a higher resolution which wasn't released but will be released. When we look at that, we have a very serious issue because, forgive me, but mines are supposed to detonate at water level. So either this ship has pumped out ballast to bring the ship up, but looking at the distance, there would have to be a huge amount of stuff dumped, or somebody attacked the ship above water level. Now, it's possible that it was done because they didn't intend to sink it at all. They just wanted to have some publicity. That's the first thing. The second thing is the hole to the right of it. Let's have this blow up, which isn't available but will become available. Right, it's a small hole to the right. That's, for those of you who've ever taken an interest in the war, that's a sort of hole that a shell makes from a cannon or a tank or a weapon when it hits thick armour. Now, it's possible that hole is designed to pump water out, but why would you have something so close to the water level? What we don't see there is scouring or scoring. And an explosion creates hot fragments of metal. Those hot fragments of metal, as they fly out, they scar or scratch the surface area. It's not showing on that. Also, the type of explosion there is not consistent with one of these. That's purportedly an Iranian mine. Just to give you some idea, if you think of a paper cup, and you were to look at a paper cup, and the circumference of the diameter of that paper cup, it's a sort of size, it's very small. In old money, about 4 inches. Now, I find it very, very difficult to believe that it's created that hole. So we'll come back to that. There you go, got that for you. That's in centimetres. That'll give you the size of it. There's no way that that created that hole. But that's what we're being sold. We're being sold that this is the real deal here. So let's look at this. This is later with the buoy around the side of it, and it's a good high resolution picture, and there's absolutely no scarring hot metal around it. But the metal is pressed in towards the ship, so whatever struck it has come through. Well, there was one report from a crew member, which only made it into the first editions, of a missile coming very close to the water. Ship-to-ship missiles have to skim the water to try to, come under the cover of radar. This, I think, is a missile without a warhead. In other words, the warhead is taken out and you just put a lot of very heavy metal, steel, into the warhead to produce that. It does not look like an energy weapon to me, because if you look here, you'll see the metal's been buckled in. That's a physical thing on a third-dimensional world, where something has come through and forced the metal back. Energy weapon wouldn't have done that. So that tells me a solid shot has been fired and has forced that portion of the metal back. So I don't believe we're looking at a mine at all, because a mine would have blown the metal inwards, not to the side. So I think we've got a missile, ship-to-ship fired, with no warhead in it. Okay. Right, who is behind it? To understand this, perhaps we need to ask what's to be gained. Well, for those of you who have done your research, you'll know that the Rothschilds activated a company just a few days beforehand and bet very heavily on the futures. Those of you who don't play the stock exchange, me included, basically you can bet that the oil price will go up or down. In fact, you can bet that anything will go up or down, and you can put money on it. And I once had an uncle who made quite a lot of money betting on the stock exchange and whether it would go up on Monday or down on Tuesday. It's crazy, isn't it? But that's what happens. So it didn't hit, in the sense that the oil futures, although it climbed, it did not go through the roof. So that company, which we know was set up by the Rothschilds, did not gain the money they thought they would from it. That doesn't mean that's what it was about. What that means is that that's a knock-on effect of somebody who knew what was going to happen and so got in on the back of it. The second one is war with Iran. I'm going to put that with the Third World War and come down to a distraction. A distraction because what's going on in the United States of America and in other countries, this was possibly a very useful way to distract certain people from actions that are taking place or are slated to take place. Now, there is some truth in that, but the major answer here is the middle two, which is a war with Iran and the Third World War. The United States of America has for long wished for a war with Iran as soon as the Shah was deposed in 1979. Shah was put in, he was their placeman, he ensured the oil came through at a reasonable rate, and he was a buffer to the Arab nations who also produced oil. With the Shah gone, then it gave them some problems. And the problem with Iran is that the president of Iran, now if I say satanic, will we get the YouTube taken down, I wonder? The president of Iran is much more in line with the leaders of Europe and certain people in America. Clinton, when she was the equivalent of a foreign secretary, actually flew to Iran, and that's when she had that accident, you remember? We were told she had an accident, but actually one of her Navy SEAL bodyguards shot her in the aeroplane because he saw her change. He actually saw her physically change, and he shot her. And then, this is some years ago now, and there's a report that she'd had some sickness and she was out of the Congress for quite a bit. But she was on her way to meet with the then president. Now, the interesting thing is that the Ayatollah, the senior religious guy in Iran, is much more open to conversation because he's not part of the same group. So what we've got in Iran is two forms of government at human level, never mind anything else at the moment. So we've got this president who is very much a part of the cabal, and we've got the Ayatollah, the leader, who's so into religion that he's not involved in that. So what we're looking at there is a situation where in Yemen, this is a proxy war that's being fought. The United States definitely wants a war with Iran. There's no question of that. That's going to happen. But the real problem for them is China. China is on the verge of seriously undermining the economic and political clout of the United States. That's why, ask yourself, where's Russia in all this? Putin has played a very low profile. It's just haven't heard of him. And if push came to shove, Putin would join with the US, because China is an enemy to Russia, just as China is an enemy to the US. So what we have is a situation where these tankers were potentially carrying something other than conventional arms. They were on their way, and they were intercepted and attacked. It was not the intention to sink them. That's a really important thing to understand, because that would have gone straight into a world war, would have done. But the incident was to send a warning shot, and you've got the Americans sending warning threats, and you've got the Chinese sending warning threats, and the Iranians working with the Chinese. So that's why it is so serious, because it's not a standard war between Israel and the Arabs. Everybody who knew what was going on knew that would only last for 2 weeks. The 1974, the Yom Kippur War, was just simply for Russia and America to send their missiles and their arms. And then after 2 weeks, they just pulled it off. This is far more serious because there isn't the same command and control structure over this. And there are off-planet entities deeply involved. There is a portal, there is a gate. There are many portals and gates, but there is a gate not too far from there. And they would really like that gate to be open for full access. So we've got a faction of alien that is anti-Russia, anti the present president, and wants to stir things up. And you've got another faction that is, or has been, fairly low-key, but is now becoming more involved. That's why you need to keep your eye on it, because it can only get worse, I'm afraid. Okay. Now, those of you who take the trouble very kindly to come and listen to me know that I usually turn up with a bag full of presents, and I haven't today, I'm afraid. I've just got a few. So we have to be very, very careful with the presents today. So who can, for no present at all, I'm afraid, who can name this person we're going to put up on the screen now? Fine. And why is he so important?
Attorney General.
Why is he so important?
He's to
the, what do you call it? Indictment. He's got key trouble.
Classification.
Okay. This guy's got a very interesting checkered history. I mean, the bad guy should have so much on him that he should be doing what they want him to do. But he's not. That's the first question we should ask ourselves. Why has he thrown his lot in with President Trump, who in effect has only got a year and a half left of office and may or may not be re-elected? And yet he's very, very strongly siding with Trump. So that tells us something quite important. This man is key, Attorney General. He has the... there are certain people in the White House that would argue with the highest ranking general, but if they believe in democracy, and we know they don't, but they have to be seen to be believing with democracy, they can't push the man around. Because to attack him too much, or to try and take him down, is to attack your own edifice of democracy. That's why this man's really important, because he's not political, and he gives President Trump a way to crowbar open or prise open certain things. And you're right, we'll come on to those things about indictments in a minute. But this man is absolutely key, and I can tell you that this man receives one of the highest protection anywhere in the US outside of the president and the president's family. Right, there he is. How old is he?
74? He's ancient.
He's ancient. He's ancient. Does he look ancient? Doesn't look ancient, does he? Well, any idea when he was born? Okay, I'm not pronouncing my words properly, which is shame on me. No, when, not where. When was he born?
1942.
Wow. Who's that? Who's that? Bill Clinton. And how much older is Bill Clinton? Older than Trump? How many years older is he? 10, 20? How old? How can that be? No, seriously, how can that be?
Promiscuity.
What? Which way?
Clinton's reptilian.
Simon, was that his clone or was that the real?
No, that's the real one.
That's reptilian.
No, well, hang on a minute. Okay, so Trump was 14th of June 1946, and William Clinton, I don't call him the first name because I'm not going to give him that honour. William Clinton, 19th of August. But when you look at the pictures, you have to ask yourself why. Now, if you had been a senior politician, as Clinton had been, and you'd made very many difficult decisions, you could perhaps be forgiven for saying that would happen. But look, that's what Trump's doing. If you, and I've got to be very careful now because the law's changed. I've got to be very careful. But let's say, for instance, a person murders children, does evil, horrible things to children. That person's got to live with a conscience. And as long as you're not a clone, you'll have a soul, though some clones do have souls now, but never mind. You are continually having a fight between the earth, which wants the humanity, and that part of you which is satanic, which doesn't. And one half is trying to expel the other. So the physical body tries to expel the soul, and the soul wants to actually hang on in the body, but at the same time doesn't want to be part of it. So what is expressed physically is what is taking place energetically. Now that is why those two men are the same age, and yet one looks as if he's fantastic, basically for the age, and the other one looks as if he's ready to die. And that's what I want you to please understand, that when people take part in certain things, it physically expresses itself. It cannot hide it. Right. For many years, there's been the talk about a reset, and before that it was economic collapse. And I, along with many other people, felt that perhaps one of the best ways to wake up the unawake and unaware people would be for them to have some great shock. Because let's face it, the only thing they're going to be bothered about is when they put the piece of plastic in the cash machine and it doesn't give them any money. Or they go to the supermarket and it's we've got nothing left on the shelves. It seems that as long as that operates, people will just about do what they're told. So one way from out of this would have been a very large shock to the system. The drawback to that is that no matter what we are told, it can't be easily managed. In other words, there's a real potential for a country or a group of countries to absolutely implode and the citizens of that country to be left in a terrible state, which would create a civil war. So what I want to tell you is, my understanding now is that that's not on the cards. The military for the United States of America receives most of its funding through the stock exchange. Most of the money that funds the American military is through Wall Street. If there was a huge economic collapse, the military is not going to get any money. So first on the peg here is that the military don't want a collapse. President Trump came to office saying he'd make jobs. Well, if it financially collapsed, there won't be jobs. So what I can tell you is the information I've received is that they've just about pulled it off. There will be no economic collapse. It was very much on the cards 2, 3, 4 years ago, very close. So whatever happens in Europe, America is attempting to protect itself, and whatever your feelings about Brexit, whether you're for it or against it, one of the advantages that Trump sees for Britain leaving is that if there was an implosion with the European Central Bank, then America and Britain could weather the storm. It was one of the questions or one of the topics of debate that Trump had with the Queen. The President did not speak to the Prime Minister because A, she's not going to be around, and B, she doesn't have the same views that he does. Now, a lot of people have said, oh, Trump's selling out, he's talking to the Queen. I'm afraid that that's coming from ignorance, and I'm not being disrespectful or rude. The Queen is one of the most powerful people on the planet. I'm saying person. She's one of the most powerful creatures on the planet. And what Trump's got to do is he's got to do a deal with her. He has to, because she is so influential. Look, Nazi Germany lost the Second World War because it fought on more than one front. It was fighting on one front against the Russians, and the Russians were winning, but only just. So if you have got an agenda to try and bring some good, the last thing you want is to be fighting in every corner. You want to just concentrate on one battle at a time. The Queen can open doors and make things happen which might suit Trump at this time. So let's not just throw something out. I mean, in my work, I meet good people and I meet very evil people. And when I meet a good person, those of you who might have had a talk to me on the Skype, and I tell you that you're good, it's not because I'm trying to bullshit you. It's because it's great to meet a good person. Because if you meet evil people, then you meet a good person, you're reminded about why you're doing it. Recent visitors. Okay. Kerry just mentioned, perhaps things, we pick things up here and there. Well, we do. We've had a number of people come round and have a chat to us. A person who had a meeting with Putin, Greek gentleman, and he had a meeting in London and decided it would be really nice to pop in and spend 3 or 4 hours talking to me. And then some weeks later, a person who'd met President Trump on Air Force One had some meetings and decided it would be really nice to come in and have a chat with me. What's important is that I can tell you is that both poles, let's forget China at the moment, that the Russians and the Americans have technology which is not of this, well, it is of this earth, it's Antarctica, but originally it wasn't from this place. And to prevent a third world war, both Russia and America have been given the same technology at the same time, but both are choosing to do something slightly different with it. So that prevents a conflict. And we were talking, Mark Steele and I and some of the others, a little earlier, talking about electric cars and how bad electric cars might be. And why is it that, someone like Elon Musk can raise up huge quantities of money for electric cars and they just don't work. And year after year after year, they're posting eye-watering losses. And yet if anyone else did that, they would be closed down. So we know they're being bankrolled. We've been bankrolled because there's something not quite right about an electric car. And those of you who have a hybrid or electric car, I'm not, talking to you, I'm not talking about that, I'm talking at the wider level. Both Russia and America are on the verge of producing a material that will mean that fossil fuels do not emit pollution. Now, I know we'd like what the Americans call zero-point energy and free energy, but at the moment, we're not going to get that. With corporations and the control of the system, there is absolutely no way. And anyone who dreams of that, I'm sorry, you're not living the real world, because in order to get that out, we have to change the way this world is governed. So, we hear about people who've discovered it, and I'm sure they have, and then they have some idea about how they will sell it to you. Maybe you'll buy it from them online, or maybe they'll do this. Do you really honestly believe that any corporation in the world would allow somebody who had a technologically advanced form of energy, would he be allowed to sell it to you? No, absolutely not. Tesla was the proof of that, the real Tesla. So at the moment, there are on this planet a large number of people who have this technology, but there's no way to bring it to market, not and live. If you're a corporation and you have a huge investment in oil, say 10, 20 years ago, what you do is move to wind power. And all they did was replace nodding donkeys in Britain or America or oil derricks with huge poles with windmills on them. So it's exactly the same thing. It's we, the corporation, own it, not you, the people. So all they did was they just jumped from one to the next. Think about smoking cigarettes. What did those huge, powerful companies do? They just jumped to the vape machines. So what is on the cards in the next 2 years is diesel and petrol that produce zero emissions. So for those of you who don't want fossil fuels, I'm sorry, from what I'm seeing, that there will still be a huge market for fossil fuels, but there will be no pollution. It's the death of the electric car. Because why would you have an electric car if you can have a petrol or diesel car that they can't tax you on because it produces no emissions? And that's absolutely genuine. Both sides, both Russia and America, have that at the moment. Okay, the Russians are using it somewhat differently. Why is Putin so quiet? He is very quiet at the moment because he's watching the West decide who's running it. Is it the satanic force, or is it the people through a different force? That's why Putin's keeping a low profile on it. He doesn't need to be drawn into this. This is not his Kabbalah fighting. It's the Western side. Putin is also very clearly aware that China is the main enemy, and if America can deal with Iran, it makes it a little bit easier for Russia. So the very fact that Putin is being quiet should tell us quite a lot. At the moment, there's a war going on, what I call the non-military satanic brotherhood and the military. For the last 20 years, I know most people haven't spoken about this, for the last 20 years, the US military has worked tirelessly to remove as many satanic individuals as it could from the military side, not the political side. It hadn't got control of that. And after 9/11, it was the final straw. They decided that they would take back the country. It was 9/11 that did that. And their real bugbear was, of course, the Bush family. And they began to purge senior military. And if you can remember, Obama sacked a number of generals and Navy people because they were basically saying to him, we're not going to follow you anymore. So he removed them. And what Trump's been doing is working with those retired and non-retired military people. So this is a war that is taking place. Right, I want you to watch this. It's not new. It's a few weeks old, but this is an element that you've not seen. Okay, why it's really important is that I said to you there's a war going on, but it's not a war that we would understand and we would see. The people who saw that were aware something wasn't right. And certainly there was a warning that was sent out, but the warning that was sent out at the moment of the attack. The building that was a cultural centre was just a cement building, basically. And it was, as they say, slated for demolition. What we believe is there was a very nasty biological weapon that was stored in there. When the building would have been hit down with a ball and chain, it would have absolutely spread that all over the city. That's why they went in and raided it. Now, we haven't got time, but you can now, this has now been posted. And you will see them coming out, the troops coming out, carrying huge metal containers, carrying the bioweapons. And also there's a clip in there, which is not CGI, where you'll see troops appear to disappear, as if they have some form of camouflage suit. And the last time we saw anything like this was on Al Jazeera in Afghanistan, where they managed to show a clip of an American soldier running to a tank, and then he just disappeared. So there are these camouflage suits that are available, and they were used on that raid. So if you go home and you have a look at that, then please watch it right the way through. But it's true. It's not a joke. It's not fake news. That's real. It was a biological weapon held there, and they wouldn't have had to detonate a single bomb. As the guys smashed the place apart, it would have released the contaminants. And that's what I mean by a war going on. All right. So what's with Julian Assange? We all love him, really. He's like Father Christmas now, isn't he? What was interesting is when he was carried out from the embassy. Do you remember that? Yes, shouting. What was he shouting? What was he shouting when he was carried out?
What I ever wanted to do was tell the truth.
Fantastic. Present for you in a minute. All I've ever done through my life is tell the truth. That's what he said. Now, go back and watch the YouTube clips. Look at the policemen all standing around smiling. It's a complete setup. Absolute setup. For the good reason, not a bad reason. When the police are removing somebody from a foreign country's embassy, they don't stand around smiling. It's very serious because this is another country's soil. And the legal technicality here is that he was carried out so that no part of his body touched the ground. Because if it touched the ground, then English or British law would have had to come into play. And I put a message on the site sort of soon after that saying, right, if he's extradited to Sweden on these sex charges, the bad guys have won. If he's extradited to the US on spying charges, the good guys have won. So let's see where it goes. And he's been extradited, going to be extradited to the US. So the reason for that is that in his head are codes which he has information to, which President Trump wants. This man has been sitting on information, and this is the deal that's been done. So if he goes to the US, he's going to have some information on people. So that's why he's got the thumb up. Now the other bit is quite interesting. I'm sorry that it's not so clear. There's a little trick. Every photograph that we get as the members of the public have not come through by chance. Everything is stage managed. Look at this guy here. Who might that be?
William Barr.
Is the right answer. Looks like it. We can't say it is. But that's a message to the bad guys, because in the reflection of this car window appears to be William Barr. So any of the bad people looking at this now have the impression that William Barr is behind all the legal stuff, moving things around. It's very clever. It doesn't have to be. In actual fact, it isn't, because I've had a look, and the mole on Barr has a mole. This guy's even got a mole. It's not quite where it should be. They've really worked hard on it. But basically, it's sending a message. Okay, how many times have President Trump they tried to kill him, roughly? 6, 8. Right. I'm fairly clear it's between 6 and 8. Okay, but I have been told, and so I'm not disagreeing, I've been told it's into double figures. From the most pathetic attempts right through to the most serious attempts. I can think of no other president in America's history that has so many attempts. Even Adolf Hitler didn't have that many attempts on him. So this is absolutely outrageous. And I know it's difficult, but if you can try and listen to some of the times when Trump's talking, he is dropping, not code words in, but his words. If you can read between the lines, I'll just paraphrase for you. He just before, the last week, he said of Hillary Clinton, how many emails were on her server, her computer, and all the rest of it. And he said, look, if Donald Trump had sent one email on a White House computer that was personal, if he'd sent one email, and he said, and it was just to my wife saying I love her, he said, they would want Donald Trump in the electric chair. And the audience laugh. They don't understand what he's saying. What he's saying is, I want Hillary Clinton in the electric chair. Now, that's actually not a joke. He actually wants that. Because what I can tell you is that no matter how many attempts on Trump, there have been a real attempt to kill his family. And that's the point that Trump decided he'd had enough. So what you will look for is any court case that either takes place in an American state that has the death penalty, like Texas or some of the others. There are not that many now. Or whether it's done through a military tribunal. But basically, if he's seeking the death penalty, then he will seek a court case against certain individuals in states that still have the death penalty. So he's basically coming out saying, I am looking for the death penalty for certain people. That's an important point to understand, because when we understand that, we understand why the other side are doing what they're doing. Right, what's the wall about? When it was first built, it was a concrete wall, and those of you who've seen the early ones that were built, and the highest checkpoints. And, he's not a fool. He used the word wall deliberately. He had no intention of building a wall. He had the intention of building a barrier. That's the wall, or part of the wall, and that's why it can be done a lot cheaper. What do you notice about that? It does look like a snake, doesn't it? What can we notice about it?
Concertina wire.
It's got wire, yeah. What else can we notice about it? It does look like a dragon. What's it made of? No, it's not made of concrete. That's the whole point. Steel. Fine. Good. Right, what I want to tell you all is that the last 3 years plus, this is one of the reasons for all the steel deals going on between Canada and America, something's been done to all the metal. The steel that's being used in the wall will be slightly different from the metal used elsewhere. And now, I don't know the technology, I've not seen it. But apparently, so I'm told, it would be possible to generate a wave from somewhere in America which would resonate off the length of this wall, which would come back and do something to knock out the effect of 5G. Now, that's why I've said time and time again, my concern is never for the citizens of the United States of America. My concern is for Europeans, British, etc. I know for a fact, what I definitely know is that Trump is aware that 5G is not what we're being told. Okay, I've been absolutely 100% tell you that Trump's had a number of briefings and knows that 5G is not good. So this, like many other things, will play a double role. So I just want to let you know that he is aware of that. And it does rather fly in the face of people who say that Trump is a shrill or he's this and that. I can tell you that he's not. Right. I'm really happy to do this because I often get told, you don't talk about aliens enough. You never talk about aliens. You used to talk about aliens a lot in the old days, and you don't do it anymore. So I can't not, because look, it's the 4th of July very soon. This is Mexico. Not New Mexico, of course, but New Mexico, and the 4th of July 1947. It was just before that, but anyway, here we go. I want to show you this. It's really important because you must please understand that Trump is incredibly knowledgeable. Absolutely knowledgeable. And those of you who are aware of this, do you know what he's holding in his hand?
They deal with Mexico with writing on it.
Fantastic. Anybody from Britain know a bit more about that? Okay. You see? Right, he did a deal with Mexico. Basically, everyone was saying to him, you're a horrible man because these poor migrants, the women and children, they're coming up and, it's awful. And so what he did was he said to the Mexican government, unless you take control of this, I am going to stick 5% tariff on all of your goods. Within 12 hours of that threat, the Mexican government had frozen every bank account of every trafficker in Mexico. So that tells me that the Mexican government were fully aware of who, because otherwise how did they get hold of them? How did they freeze their bank accounts? So they've closed down the bank accounts of all these gang masters who were bringing these poor unfortunates, and they are victims. Don't get me wrong, don't misinterpret me. These people coming from Mexico to the border are victims, but they're being manipulated by somebody much more powerful with a lot of money. So this is the exciting part. So he stands there and he shows you this. Can anybody else tell me in history when we've seen this? Chamberlain is one. Well done. That's not the answer I want, but it's well done. Look how he's holding it. No. Okay. Well, no, he knows that the technology is there to read that. He knows the technology, even within the civil side, is there to read it. But wait a moment. And then he gets a bit more exciting, and he even holds it like that for you. But this is the point that I don't think anyone else has picked up on. Here we go. You ready for this? What's that? Roswell. Right. Now, back then, General Ramey, who's holding the telegram, wasn't aware, and there wasn't the technology available to read the telegram at that point. It just wasn't. But you must see the connection here. He has no clue that many, many years later will be read. But Trump is looking back on this and makes the joke. Okay? I've never met President Trump, but one of my Connecting Consciousness coordinators did at his inauguration, the party of the night before the inauguration. So she just had a chat with him, and I can tell you honestly and truthfully that he understands the alien agenda. He is fully aware of it and fully understands it. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but of course, John F. Kennedy, and I forget whether he was a senator or a congressman, but he was one of the few to receive the secret report from Roswell. He was a very young congressman, I think, and he was one of the few to receive it. Now, if there is a real connection, and we're coming on to that, you know, me and time, but if there is a connection, this is why Trump is doing this. Okay, so here we go. So I do have to talk about this. That is a photograph blown up, taken in 1947. And you couldn't do anything with it in 1947. Now, those of you who I can just move across, you are aware of this. Have you seen the digital transaction of this? One has, two, three. It's worth me doing it then. Right, so that was it. There we go. Nothing happened. And then, many years later, by sticking all that into a computer, you can read it. Could everybody read that? I'll give you a moment to read it. I'll read it out, okay. Right, so it says the Army Air Force acknowledges, this is on this letter that General Ramey is holding, okay, it's a telegram, acknowledges that a disc is the next new find west of the cordon. At location was a wreck near the operation at the something in addition a pod, and then the word aerofoil. And it says the ranch, we know that's Brazil's ranch, the ranch and the victims of the wreck you forwarded to the, I think it's the CIC team at Fort Worth, Texas. Aviators in the disc, they will ship for A1 Army Air Force with the visitors. And by B-29 or C-47, Wright Air Force Base will assess the airfoil at Roswell. I can't make the rest of it out. Then the CIC, which is the very early CIA. Before the CIA was created, the CIC was their secret service, but it was very much part of the military. The CIC team said that the misstate, that's an American word, we don't really use it in the country, it doesn't mean mistake if you misstate something, okay? So the misstate, meaning the story, etc., etc. Today they will send out a PR on the weather balloon, would work far better if the photographs were used showing the land drain cruise. Right, so basically what that telegram does is show that Roswell was real, that a disc, a craft was found, but another part, which is the escape pod, and it calls it the escape pod. This is the escape pod that was separate and had the end part blown out of it, and 3 aliens, greys, Orion greys, fell out and were found on a debris field. So that's absolutely proof that Roswell is real. And what Trump is doing, for those of you in the know, and you are now all in the know, he's giving a nod to that. And the trick here is, of course, this was New Mexico, and he's doing a deal with Mexico. He just couldn't let it go. It was just too much fun. He's a clever man. He's a very, very clever man. Don't ever misunderstand him. And I feel so sorry for Jesse Marcel, who was a major. If you look at the eyes, I know it's difficult at the back there, he's lying. And, you know, how could a major mistake the pieces of tin foil for a weather balloon for 2 or 3 lorry loads of very interesting debris which had to be flown out? I don't think Win Keach would mind. Win Keach was a Royal Air Force pilot, used to fly Jaguar aircraft, ground attack, and Tornado air superiority fighters. And as an RAF guy, he had access to certain things, and he was able to ascertain that indeed certain aircraft did leave a certain number of airfields with this material in, and that started his long journey of battles with the authorities. So that's why Jesse Marcel looks the way he does, because he's been asked to lie. He was rewarded, of course they always are. I think he was a general, but he got rewarded upwards. And there again, he's finding it really difficult to have to carry the lie, because what he's saying is that what I saw was only that. And this is exactly what the Telegram says. Your story, or your misstate, is going to fare so much better if you get some crew getting the old weather balloon together and you show that. And that was the publicity photographs that went round. All part of this deception. Now, those of you who remember that the Roswell newspaper carried the fact that a flying disc had been found, and then the next day it was retracted, there's a little bit more to it than that. I know this isn't the subject of my talk, but there were 2 crash sites, major crash sites. And the public were aware of one, but they weren't aware of the other. And so when they advertised where the site was, that was deliberately to draw the attention away from the true crash site, from their perspective, because they had a nearly complete craft. We have a problem because even the most wonderful organisers and investigators can't decide whether it was something like that or it was something like this. I don't like that one, because the sort of struts on the side are too human. I much prefer this one, which is much more realistic. In fact, it was a subject of a model that a company called Testers, out of business now, made in the United States. You can get them on eBay, just. And that's much more like it. And this is the pod. In all money, about 12 feet long, contains 6 to 8 greys. The female pilot would be at the back. She's the only one with the soul in her body. All the others are clones, no soul in them, none required. We know that they come from Orion because when they were found, the archaeologists described them holding boxes. You can call that the Orion cube or the Orion box. And this is part of their mind-bending time control. So we know it's from Orion. So there we go. And this is a genuine photograph, but that seems very human, that sort of device in there. So we want to talk about back engineering. This is from the Roswell Museum. I had to put this one in. It's not accurate. They're the wrong sort of greys. They're tall greys, but they are very much like Whitley Strieber's grey. They remember on the front cover of his book. So they're absolutely genuine in the sense that I would call them a tall grey, but they're not the same creatures that landed in Roswell. Here's a really good representation, and that's much more realistic. So that's what you're looking at, something about 3 feet tall, interestingly enough with little nostrils. That's quite interesting. Thank you. Right, okay, Independence Day. We in Britain call it July the 4th, but the Americans should probably call it Independence Day. Right, we're going to talk about QAnon. We're going to talk about what may or may not be occurring now. And people have been asking me, will I talk about it? Yes, I will. As an overview, I know probably you can't all see it, but the left-hand side, I just showed you with the needle thing, that's a Lincoln Memorial. And we run straight from there right across to to what I call the Ulysses Grant Memorial, or number one, there's the Capitol building. So you're going from east to west there. That's this wonderful national mall. Remember, the word mall doesn't mean the same to us as it does to the Americans. This is a place that the public can go to, but this will be the first time that on Independence Day they will be allowed to go to en masse. Some disagreement about how it's going to work out. I do understand there's a 100-mile air exclusion zone. So there will be a 100-mile air exclusion zone, because what they don't want is people flying airplanes into the crowd. Okay? There's no way that the police on their own can manage that, so I'm expecting military personnel to be there frisking everybody down. You're not allowed to take a weapon in of any sort into this group. This is to celebrate, ostensibly, this is the pool of reflection where you can go and have a little think. To think and talk about the wonders of the United States of America, and I'm absolutely being honest with you, and to celebrate the fact that America is the greatest country on the planet. Right, conspiracy theorist. Where does the word conspiracy theorist come from?
CIA. 1964.
Fantastic. I'm running out of presents. I'll read it. Right, and this is taken from one of his quotes. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that rules out covert means of expanding its spheres of influence, infiltration instead of invasion, subversion instead of electronics, intimidation instead of free choice, guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific and political operations. John F. Kennedy. So when Kennedy was assassinated, to try to cover it up, that is why the CIA coined the phrase conspiracy theorist. So it was all to stop people talking about the assassination. And now look how that word is used to smear anybody who tries to talk about a topic that certain elite people don't want discussed. Right. This is the burial place, and as you can see, it's done in a large letter Q. This is the reason why it's got the label QAnon. This is the whole point for this. So there is the great man himself, and there's John F. Kennedy Jr. Okay? Okay. Who is Vincent Oscar? Who is he?
JFK Jr.
But is he?
But is the real one. He's the real one. He's the real one. In disguise.
All right. Well look. If I look back, and I was saying to people earlier today, if I look back on my life and I think of the way that I was brought up, you do not show your asset. If we accept that the person who attempted to or did murder the young Kennedy is still alive today and in high political office, or reasonably high political office, would you really bring out the person who they authorized to be killed 20 years ago and show them round? Doesn't make any sense. That's the bottom line. So either we're looking at this really is Mr. Kennedy Jr., or it's a group of people who have just got together and decided they're going to have some fun, or it's a group of people who are being organized by Mr. Trump. Because this guy gets everywhere. He gets everywhere. He has access to Trump Towers. He has access to all of the campaign meetings. He stands behind the president. And the other person could be the sister, or his wife. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Could be. So that's what he was before he was allegedly murdered, or murdered in 1999. And here's the picture, because it's difficult to work on it. Do you remember Vincent Fusker's battle bus? Can you anybody remember that? No, remember he had a Trump mobile. You remember Trump mobile? Oh dear. Okay, look at the hands. It's quite interesting. Standing, very similar pose. That's quite a telltale. I'm not saying one way or the other because I genuinely, honestly don't know. I really don't know. I have not met him face to face. But I just want to show you this. I'll just do an enlargement. I know you were standing up at the back. It's interesting that a person might stand like that. And it's interesting that Junior, when asked if he would like to be president, he actually said, oh no, I think that it would be better if Trump went for president. 20 years ago. 20 years ago. So, this is him with the battle bus, the Trump-mobile. Okay? And outside Trump Towers. There's something more interesting, is that I know you won't have read it, or if you have, you've forgotten, but when JFK Jr.'s plane went down in the ocean, the newspapers immediately drew a conclusion that he was disorientated because it was the morning sky, or there was a haze or a fog, and many of the newspapers used the phrase that he was disorientated. What's really interesting is that Vincent Fusker had lost his Trumpmobile. And he said to people, well, he'd driven it from his home in Churchill into the grey heart of Washington, D.C., and Mr. Fusker now stood on the corner of 18th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue, this is from a newspaper, in his blue suit and black fedora, trying to remember where the hell he'd parked it. Okay, and he said, well, I made a left on 18th, so I came down 18th. I am so disorientated right now. So he's deliberately using the words that the newspapers used for the death of Junior by saying that he was flying the plane, apparently, and he was terribly disorientated. So either, ladies and gentlemen, we are really in the presence of John F. Kennedy Jr. or a most excellent deception designed to somehow blindside those people who are very evil. And here's a fancy dress party with him behind it. So he has a lot of backing. So even if this is just a group of people, and there isn't any truth in this element of QAnon, he is being supported at the highest level from the good side to be a counterbalance. Now, remember that Junior and Trump were very close friends. They really did get on very well together.
Are you saying he's Q?
I've always said that Q was a group of people and a supercomputer. I've always said that. There are people that say that Trump is QAnon plus, and that JFK is Q. I cannot say that because I genuinely don't know. I really, truthfully don't know.
When it's a cult symbolism, Q means witch.
And that's why he talks about the witch hunt. You're absolutely spot on, because that's...
Wicked witch is in witch, but etymologically witch and who.
Yes, but they use it as WITCH, and that's why Trump is continually going on about the witch hunt, because you're exactly right. Because he knows he's dealing with black magicians and black magic, and if you have a knowledge of that, then yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, I don't know if you have the knowledge or whether that was just coincidental. Good. Right. What is this aeroplane?
Air Force One.
Ah, right. When is it not Air Force One? I'm going to have to go home. This is the most up-to-date... You're absolutely right. It's only Air Force One when the aeroplane has the president on board. It is not Trump's aeroplane, it is the office of the president. You'll be interested to know that during July the 4th, Independence Day, this aeroplane is going to fly overhead, although the president will be on the ground. Either John F. Kennedy Jr. is alive and is on that aeroplane, symbolically flying over, or it's an excellent ruse to make the bad guys think that he's on that aeroplane flying over. Why on earth would you fly that aeroplane over when you're not in it? So it cannot be advertised as Air Force One. You're quite right, that's why I'm asking you. So when the tannoy comes on and says, you know, all the fighters are coming over and the person's naming them and which Air Force base they're from, when that flies over, you can't call it Air Force One. But you have to ask yourself, why would you fly that if your president is on the ground? It's very interesting. Right, I don't really give enough talk on this, and now I think we've reached a point structurally within the organisation that I can. I created an organisation, Connecting Consciousness, and like any other organisation that sought to be spiritual, it was attacked by sometimes satanic, sometimes people with ego, sometimes people who are greedy, who wanted to make money out of the organisation. And, you know, they fall by the wayside. We are a voluntary organisation and don't even charge a membership. Don't even charge a membership. Now, at the moment, in Great Britain, we have, and I'm going to have to include Southern Ireland and not being part of Great Britain, obviously, but we have groups with coordinators in Ireland, Scotland, and within England, East and West Midlands, the southeast of England, the east of Midland, the northeast, the northwest, the southwest, and London. So each region now have groups of people who either meet physically together or online and have coordinators who once a month Skype in and give the report from each group. We have these countries with exactly the same: France, Germany, Spain, Switzerland, the USA, that's huge, Canada, Greece, Belgium, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Netherlands, Australia, New Zealand, and Argentina. All of these countries have people who are members of Connecting Consciousness, meet regularly, either online or physically, and have coordinators, and once a month have a meeting, and all these coordinators give feedback of information to me, how they're doing, what they're doing. I went down this road because I looked at other people and what they've done, and you've heard me say this before, who tried to use the system. So, you know, David Icke, television, radio, internet system, Dr. Stephen Greer, a film, and they wanted to change the world. I've no doubt for good reasons, absolutely. But the system is designed to protect itself. And as soon as they engaged with the structures of the system identified them as someone trying to change, and so stopped them. You know, bank manager, accountant, all of these positions of responsibility and power activate the fourth dimension. And that's why people like Stephen Greer's film did not have the great impact he hoped for, and that's why, God bless him, David Icke was marched out of his own studio. Can you imagine being frog-marched out of your own studio? And you'd raised £250,000, or whatever it was. Maybe I've said too much, but he raised a lot of money from donations for good-meaning people who did not give money so that he could be pushed out of his office. So I went down the road of building on people's hearts, because that's not a structure. It can't be taken down like that. People's brains can, their minds can, and so ego and greed, satanic energy come into play. But we now have a structure across many countries, and those people meet, they support each other, they talk about, you know, what's important to them, they share links, they share ideas, we have group meditations. You know, we are forming in a very small way an organization that can actually be a blueprint for something much larger. So if you're not a member of Connecting Consciousness, please join. Please join. And that's the end of my talk. Now, I am happy to take some questions, because I understand there was no questions in on Saturday. Thank you. Thank you. You're always so kind, and you know, I truly never take anything for granted. I realise that the power of the people, that sounds really terrible, but is at grassroots level. You know, and I don't disappear into an expensive limousine. They don't have people whisk me away, this, that, and the other. You know, and I just wanted to quickly, I will take your question, I promise. Watch for these arrogance on Google lately. I've been seeing, or on YouTube, let's say, let's go politics. There's Brexit. It says all you need to know about Brexit. Have you seen this phrase coming up? All you need to know. That's so arrogant. It's so controlling. It's like, really what it should say is all we want you to know. You see, what we should say is what we need to know. What we need to know. So please look for the language. Look and see these organisations, how utterly nasty they are. Hi.
Simon, so you're probably aware of like the Hillary Clinton head wobble and the kind of like the shaking. This week I think Angela Merkel was at a parade and she was kind of shaking. This was in the mainstream news. You've got Jean-Claude Juncker also shaking. What's going on with all of that?
Well, interestingly enough, let's look at Parkinson's. It's a genetically carried disease. And 4 years ago, here, I showed some pictures of Angela Merkel and Adolf Hitler. Those of you who were here might remember it. And it wasn't I, it was the audience that said, oh, it looks like they're related. If a person does a deal with the devil, and I don't mean something from a Stephen King novel, although that's bad enough, and I don't recommend you have one in your house. But if you really do such a deal, and things don't happen the way that you were promised, you begin to go into shutdown. And you're right, these key leaders across the world are uncontrollably shaking. Now, with Adolf Hitler, it started the Battle of Stalingrad, when the Nazis lost in January 43. His left arm started. Then we go right through to July 44 with the bomb plot, the other part of him started. So all one side shake. So what I'm saying to you is that when, and remember Hitler had done the deal with the Spear of Destiny, with the demon that lived in the Spear of Destiny, that Longinus had stabbed Jesus and the demon had gone into the spear. So what I'm saying is that when a person does deals with anything from the satanic fourth dimension, and then the chickens come home to roost, shall we say, then the physical begins to split from the energy. The soul begins to reject what's around it. And so the brain is organic, and the brain and the soul are fighting. Now, that's what's happening. So what I expect to see is a number of leaders retiring from medical grounds very soon. So it's not an energy beam weapon. There's no psychic attack going on here. This is the individual in total meltdown because they cannot reconcile what they have done in this lifetime with the humanity and the word of love.
Simon, wait.
You know, thing that had worked out about 5G and absolutely terrifying and shaking.
The amazing thing is that under the old 3 or 4G, it was possible to get away from it. But under 5G, you won't be able to get away from it. So everyone's going to be zapped with it. And I came across a system to try to control what I call these middle managers. Up until now, they've been using mind control, blackmail, the usual stories. But there was Harold Kaltzvella had unwittingly stumbled upon this, and in fact it was a very difficult conference because unwittingly he took us somewhere where we didn't want to go. But he had stumbled upon something of the highest importance, and what I would say to you is that one of the ways that the cabal were looking to control their middle managers was by placing a demonic entity inside each one of them, and then having a master controller being able to control those demons in those people. And I can say to you, I think it probably bought 4 to 5 years of time that particular entity was destroyed without serious detrimental effect to the person carrying that demon. So the evil side is far more advanced than many people actually understand, and that is why President Trump has to go as carefully as he can. You know, I push sometimes on my radio show. I say, look, you know, get on with it, do it. We're getting fed up. But the reality is, if this other side, if we accept that, have the type of power that they've had since the days of Babylon, then you can't just in 4 years come in and dismantle it. They've had thousands of years of creating it. So as frustrating as it is and as difficult as it is, sometimes things have to be done at a rate. And if you've never seen magic, real magic, then you haven't seen what's possible. And I can tell you that the impossible is possible. And that's what's being fought over. It's not just missiles and bombs and bullets. It's not just mind control. It's not psychic microwave weapons. There's a far worse thing that we're dealing with. But the great thing is that I am standing here talking to you, and a thunderbolt hasn't come down and obliterated us. And I've always believed that there is a real future for humanity. We didn't come here just to go quietly. We didn't come here to say, oh, that was great, now we're finished. That's not the point of this. The point of this is to see this through, to evolve, and to go on to whatever is waiting for us. And if we believe in that, then I can honestly tell you that anything evil won't be coming with us. It's not about heaven and hell, forget that. It's just simply about you making a choice to not just do good, but to actually not engage with that which is evil. And if you can do that, you will actually advance both yourself and the people around you. So what I'm saying to you is I don't have a negative message on this. I have a concerning message, but I actually believe that the outcome is positive. It's not a doom and gloom session at all. I'll take a few more questions and I think I'm going to have to go. Hi.
Yeah, quick question. President Erdogan, a week or so ago, gave out life sentences to the 70 people involved in the coup. And those life sentences were 164 lifetimes for each one. And I was wondering what your view would be on that.
Well, that's important, but what was more important was the death of the ex-Egyptian president literally in the court. That's actually the most serious thing we've ever seen. It's one thing to drown in your bath. It's quite another to keel over and die in a court case. And this is the power of magic. I mean, it could be a concoction of drugs, and the chemist had worked it all out and said at 3:03, this will kick in. I don't actually believe it was like that at all. It's something far more advanced. But this is really what we're up against, people who will stop at nothing. So when sentences or any public statement is given out, it's given out with messages to both sides. So the bad guys will do it with a message for the good, and the good will do it with a message for the bad. And this is the game they're playing. Numbers and numerology. Okay, that is a science all of its own, or it's a magic all of its own. And, whenever this happened, both sides scrabble down, get the occult out, have a look through, and try and work out what those numbers mean and why it means that. I don't want to go too much into it, because that's something that's still playing out at the moment. We had Guatemala and Argentina have their power completely cut off, and there's a lot going on there. A couple more questions, and I think I will have to go because I've gone forever. Is that Miles Johnson with his hand up at the back there?
No, but I could.
No, come on, Miles. Come on. For old time's sake, Miles. Come on.
Babylonian magic on its way on.
That was on for yesterday. What is Miles looking like?
Babylonian magic. All right, let's talk about that. Yes, interesting about that. It's not the beginning of it. It was the first place that it was hooked into. If we accept, and I certainly do accept, that Atlantis was a divine feminine culture, it was totally run by the females. And for those of you who perhaps not had the knowledge, basically a female would stand by a crystal. This could be anything from 6 feet to 12 feet tall. She would stand by her crystal that she was biologically connected to. We might say a DNA connection. Her physical body would remain at the crystal, and she would go up into the other dimensions. So this was part of why the Catholic Church in particular is terrified of women. Why the Catholic Church in particular would not allow women into religion. And even at the Church of England, it took them kicking and screaming before they did it, because they are fearful of women, because women can do things that men can't. And this is, any woman who many, many lifetimes ago has been in Atlantis and is reincarnated now, that person will have tremendous powers and gifts. And so when those people came back into the earth, they found it a patriarchal society. So there were no females in positions of responsibility. It was a male-dominated. So what did women have to do to be taken seriously? They had to incarnate into a male body. As soon as they did that, we got the fraction between the male and the female. And so what Babylon, we associate Babylon with, is a form of magic which did not exist prior to that. No, Assyria came before Babylon, but Babylon was the time when these individuals incarnated into male bodies and became what we call the priesthood, which we associate with ancient Egypt. You've already had a question, Miles.
What's your thoughts on Boris?
Boris? No, it's a really good question. Had anybody else spilt red wine on the sofa, then it would not have been recorded and sent to the newspapers. Also today you're aware that they're now saying that Boris Johnson is a member or has close associates with a right-wing organisation. Boris Johnson is like Donald Trump. They are uncontrollable. The elite wanted either Gove or Hunt. So they're trying desperately to destroy Boris Johnson's chances simply because if he becomes Prime Minister, they won't be able to control him. So that was deliberately leaked to the newspapers. There's going to be lots of other stuff. The problem, again, these people have no concept of what they're dealing with. There are 160,000 paid-up members of the Conservative Party, 72% of which are over the age of 55. None of them will have a problem with Boris Johnson being a member of a right-wing organisation. They would have been much better to have said he was a member of the KGB 30 years ago. But they're stupid. Now, that's a point. The second point about the red wine, there's symbology here of blood, you see. That's a magic thing. I'm not going to go into that at the moment. But on the superficial level, there's absolutely no way that's going to do him any harm, because when people argue over wine that's been spilt, that's not going to cause him a problem. What's going to happen is the elite are going to drip more information. So I don't think he's either. I think he's just out for himself, and I don't mean that rudely and nastily. I think that he's a survivalist. He has a completely different take on the status quo, and the only bottom line here is he's not controllable, and that's why they don't want him in there. It's difficult because, you see, Trump is a clever man. Boris is just a bit crazy. I'm being truthful. He's just a bit. You wouldn't know what he would do. I mean, you just wouldn't. With Trump, at least you know that he would. You know, if he's going into a negotiation with you at 12 noon, 2 hours beforehand he'd threaten you with death, and then 5 minutes beforehand he'd say, "Let's sit round and have a drink together." There's a pattern, but with Boris there isn't a pattern. He was Mayor of London for 2 years. He was Mayor of London because the public are sick of politicians, and Boris doesn't look like a politician, so they voted for him. Okay, they didn't vote for him because he was a politician. They voted because he was so different. Is he a good man? I think if he became Prime Minister, he would be a lot better than anybody we've had for a number of years, yes. Can I take one more? Am I allowed one more question, Kerry, and then one more question?
It's only a little one on to the end of that one.
Okay.
Today is the anniversary of our vote to leave, actually, the EU.
Yes.
And I would like to know your feeling on, we managed to vote to leave and how it will influence what was going on in Europe to remove ourselves from something that was not a positive experience.
Right. Okay. Well, I voted to leave, so I'm telling you exactly before I answer your question where you know I'm coming from. I think the key point here is the Brexit Party. That's all that matters politically, the Brexit Party. Because I know that if you add up all the votes for political parties that want to remain in Europe, they're greater than those that want to leave. Not by much. It's only about 3 or 4%, but they're greater. But the point is we have a first-past-the-post system in this country, which means that as long as 3 or 4 parties all stand on different platforms, they'll split their own vote. There's only one party that says, no deal, and that's Brexit Party. Now, Peterborough by-election, they've got to move the writ very soon. For those of you who are aware, the Tory Member of Parliament has had a majority of 5,000 at the last election, but this previous one he's pushed it up to 8,000, and he's been slung out. So there's a by-election coming. Brexit, watch it, because 66% of that constituency, Brecknock and Radnorshire, I think, voted to leave. So if Brexit Party get their first member of Parliament, you can be absolutely sure that Boris Johnson will go to Her Majesty the Queen and say, I wish you to prorogue Parliament, please, close it down on the day that we're supposed to leave, and there'll be demonstrations, there'll be members of Parliament knocking at doors, but basically that's the only way they'll do it. So if Brexit Party win that by-election, then there will be a no deal, because it's the death of the Conservative Party for 25 years. Any other answer? Listen, I'm going to go. It's absolutely lovely. You know how much I love to come and see you. Thank you. Thank you so much.